Sarah Martinez had always been particular about her coffee routine. Every morning at 6:30 hours, she would arrive at the base cafeteria 15 minutes before her shift began. The ritual was sacred to her: 2 sugars, a splash of cream, and the first sip taken while standing at the large window overlooking the flight line. Today felt no different as she moved through the familiar motions, her flight suit crisp and her pilot wings catching the early morning light. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual morning energy. Mechanics grabbed quick breakfast sandwiches before heading to the hangars, administrative staff chatted over their first cups of the day, and a few early rising pilots discussed weather conditions for the day's training missions. Sarah had been stationed at Air Force Base for 8 months now, flying F-16 Fighting Falcons as part of the 64th Aggressor Squadron. She had earned her place among the elite pilots who trained other aviators in combat tactics, playing the role of enemy aircraft in sophisticated war games. At 28, Sarah had already accumulated over 1,200 flight hours and had distinguished herself as one of the most skilled pilots in her squadron. Her call sign, Phoenix, had been earned during a particularly challenging training exercise where she had managed to recover from what seemed like certain defeat, turning the tables on her opponents with a brilliant tactical maneuver. The name stuck, and now everyone from her squadron commander to the ground crew knew her by it. As she stood by the window, watching the sun paint the desert landscape in shades of gold and orange, Sarah reflected on how far she had come. Growing up in a small town in New Mexico, she had dreamed of flying since she was 7 years old, when her grandfather had taken her to an. The thunderous roar of the jets, the precision of the aerobatic displays, and the sheer power of the machines had captivated her imagination. Her parents had been supportive but realistic about the challenges she would face as a woman pursuing a career in military aviation. The journey had not been easy. The Air Force Academy had tested her limits both physically and mentally. Flight training had pushed her to the edge of her capabilities, and she had faced skepticism from some who doubted whether women belonged in fighter cockpits. But Sarah had persevered, driven by an unshakable belief in her abilities and a determination to prove that skill and dedication mattered more than gender. Now, as she prepared for another day of training missions, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The F-16 had become an extension of herself, responding to her touch with the precision of a finely tuned instrument. Her fellow pilots respected her abilities, and her commanding officers had hinted at opportunities for advancement that could see her leading her own squadron within a few years. The coffee was particularly good this morning, she noticed, savoring the rich flavor as she watched a formation of T-38 Talons taxi toward the runway for an early training flight. The base was coming alive around her, with ground crews preparing aircraft and pilots conducting pre-flight briefings. It was a world she understood completely, where precision and excellence were not just expected but demanded. Sarah glanced at her watch and realized she needed to head to the squadron building for the morning briefing. Today's mission would involve advanced air-to-air combat scenarios with visiting pilots from various NATO allies. It was the kind of challenging, high-stakes training that she lived for, where split-second decisions and tactical brilliance could mean the difference between victory and defeat. As she walked across the tarmac toward the squadron building, the desert wind whipping at her hair, Sarah felt the familiar surge of anticipation that came before every mission. The aircraft were magnificent in the morning light, their sleek forms promising speed and power. Soon, she would be climbing into the cockpit of her F-16, strapping herself into the ejection seat, and preparing to take to the skis where she felt most at home. The squadron building was already bustling with activity when she arrived. Pilots were studying mission profiles, whether officers were updating forecasts, and intelligence personnel were providing threat assessments for the day's exercises. Sarah made her way to her desk to review her assigned aircraft's maintenance logs and prepare for the mission briefing. Everything appeared to be in perfect order, just as she expected. Little did she know that this ordinary morning, beginning with her usual coffee routine and the familiar rhythm of base life, would soon take an extraordinary turn that would change everything she thought she knew about her place in the Air Force and reveal secrets that would reshape her understanding of her own capabilities and purpose. The briefing room was packed with more personnel than usual. Sarah noticed several unfamiliar faces among the crowd, men and women in different uniforms, some wearing insignia she didn't immediately recognize. The atmosphere felt charged with an energy that went beyond the typical pre-mission tension. Conversations were more subdued than usual, with frequent glances toward the front of the room where a projection screen displayed what appeared to be highly classified mission parameters. Colonel Hayes, the squadron commander, called the room to attention. Sarah had always respected Colonel Hayes, a veteran pilot with over 3,000 flight hours who had led combat missions during multiple deployments overseas. The colonel's expression was more serious than Sarah had ever seen it, and when she spoke, her voice carried an unusual gravity. "Ladies, and today's exercise is unlike anything we have conducted before," Colonel Hayes began. "We have representatives from the Pentagon's Special Access Program Office, along with personnel from several classified research divisions. What you are about to hear is compartmentalized information that does not leave this room under any circumstances." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Special access programs were the military's most closely guarded secrets, projects so sensitive that access was limited to only those with specific need-to-know authorization. She had heard rumors about such programs during her career, but had never been directly involved with any classified operations beyond the standard security clearances required for her position. A man in a civilian suit stepped forward to the podium. He was tall and lean, probably in his late 50s, with graying hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. When he spoke, his voice was calm and measured, but there was an underlying intensity that commanded immediate attention. "My name is Doctor, and I represent a joint military-civilian research initiative that has been monitoring pilot performance and capabilities for the past several years," he announced. "Through advanced biometric analysis, psychological profiling, and performance data collected during routine training exercises, we have identified a select group of aviators who demonstrate exceptional potential for specialized operations." The room was completely silent now. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat as Doctor continued his briefing. She noticed that several of the unfamiliar personnel were watching specific pilots in the room, their gazes intense and calculating. One woman in particular, wearing Navy commander's insignia, seemed to be focusing directly on her. "The program is called Project Nightfall," Doctor continued, clicking to the next slide. "It represents the cutting edge of human performance enhancement and tactical aviation. We are not talking about experimental aircraft or new weapon systems. We are talking about pushing the boundaries of human capability itself." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to process what she was hearing. Human performance enhancement in military aviation was nothing new. Pilots had always used various methods to improve their reaction times, situational awareness, and decision-making capabilities. But something about Doctor's tone suggested this was far beyond anything she had previously encountered. The next slide showed a series of brain scans and physiological data that meant nothing to Sarah, but Doctor explained that they represented pilots who had demonstrated what he called exceptional neural plasticity and stress response optimization. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine when she realized that some of the data timestamps corresponded to training missions she had flown over the past several months. "Captain Martinez," Doctor said suddenly, and Sarah felt every eye in the room turn toward her. "Your performance during exercise Red Flag last month was particularly noteworthy. Specifically, your ability to process multiple threat scenarios while maintaining situational awareness under extreme stress conditions." Sarah's throat went dry. She remembered that mission vividly. It had been one of the most challenging exercises of her career, involving simulated surface-to-air missile threats, electronic warfare jamming, and multiple bogey aircraft all converging on her position simultaneously. She had managed to not only survive the scenario, but had actually achieved a successful mission completion that had surprised even her instructors. "What Captain Martinez doesn't know," Doctor continued, "is that during that exercise, she was unknowingly participating in a classified assessment protocol. Her aircraft was equipped with advanced biometric monitoring systems that recorded her physiological responses, brain activity patterns, and decision-making processes throughout the mission." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Air Force had been monitoring her without her knowledge, analyzing her most intimate mental processes during what she thought were routine training exercises. She felt violated and confused, but also strangely intrigued. What had they discovered about her that was significant enough to warrant inclusion in a special access program? Colonel Hayes stepped forward again, and Sarah could see sympathy in her commanding officer's eyes. "Captain Martinez, you are being offered an opportunity to volunteer for Project Nightfall. This is not an order. Participation is strictly voluntary. However, I must emphasize that if you choose to participate, your life and career will change in ways you cannot currently imagine. The weight of the decision pressed down on Sarah like a physical force. Around her, she could see other pilots receiving similar revelations about their own monitored performances. The room had divided into small groups, with the mysterious personnel engaging in quiet, intense conversations with selected aviators. Sarah realized that everything she thought she knew about her career, her abilities, and her place in the Air Force was about to be fundamentally challenged. The coffee cup she had held that morning, the familiar routine of base life, the comfortable predictability of her existence as a fighter pilot, all of it suddenly seemed like a different lifetime. Doctor approached her directly, extending a sealed envelope. "Captain Martinez, inside this envelope is your performance profile and a detailed explanation of what Project Nightfall entails. You have 24 hours to make your decision. I should warn you that once you read these documents, there will be no going back to your previous understanding of your own capabilities." Sarah spent the rest of that day in a state of surreal detachment. She completed her scheduled training mission, but her mind kept wandering to the sealed envelope locked in her quarters safe. The flight had been routine basic air-to-air combat maneuvers with a visiting German pilot, but she found herself analyzing every decision, every reaction, wondering what hidden sensors might still be monitoring her performance. That evening, alone in her quarters, Sarah finally broke the seal on the envelope. The documents inside were unlike anything she had ever seen. The first was a comprehensive analysis of her psychological profile, detailing aspects of her personality and cognitive abilities that she had never consciously recognized. According to the assessment, she possessed what the researchers called exceptional cognitive flexibility and superior pattern recognition under stress conditions. But it was the second document that truly stunned her. It contained detailed recordings of her brain activity during various training missions, translated into graphs and charts that supposedly revealed her mental processes during critical decision-making moments. The analysis suggested that under extreme pressure, her brain exhibited unusual neural pathway activation that allowed her to process information and react to threats significantly faster than the average fighter pilot. The third document outlined Project Nightfall itself. The program was designed to identify pilots with exceptional natural abilities and then enhance those abilities through a combination of advanced training techniques, cutting-edge technology, and what the document vaguely referred to as cognitive optimization protocols. Participants would undergo intensive evaluation and training at a classified facility, learning to operate aircraft and systems that didn't officially exist. Sarah read through the night, her coffee growing cold as she absorbed the implications of what was being offered to her. The program promised to unlock human potential in ways that seemed almost science-fictional, but the scientific data presented was compelling and thoroughly documented. Pilots who had completed the initial phases of Project Nightfall demonstrated capabilities that surpassed anything previously recorded in aviation history. The final document contained testimonials from pilots who had already joined the program. Their descriptions of enhanced awareness, improved reaction times, and the ability to interface with aircraft systems in revolutionary ways read like fantasy. But the technical specifications and performance data suggested it was all very real. One testimonial in particular caught her attention. It was from a pilot identified only as Falcon 7, who described flying missions that pushed the boundaries of physics itself. The pilot spoke of aircraft that could perform maneuvers impossible for conventional fighters, and of sensory experiences that allowed for unprecedented situational awareness. Most intriguingly, Falcon 7 mentioned flying solo missions into contested airspace that didn't correspond to any known conflict zones. As dawn broke over the Nevada desert, Sarah made her decision. The opportunity to push the limits of human capability, to explore the absolute edge of what was possible in aviation, was too compelling to refuse. She had spent her entire career striving for excellence, and Project Nightfall represented the ultimate expression of that pursuit. At 800 hours, she reported to Colonel Hayes' office and formally accepted the invitation to join Project Nightfall. The colonel's expression was a mixture of pride and concern as she processed Sarah's decision. Within hours, Sarah's belongings were being packed, and her transfer orders were being processed through channels so classified that even Colonel Hayes didn't have access to all the details. 3 days later, Sarah found herself aboard a military transport aircraft with no windows, flying to a destination that wasn't listed on any flight plan. Her fellow passengers were the other pilots who had been selected and had chosen to participate. There were 12 of them in total, representing the best aviators from various branches of the military and allied nations. During the flight, they were briefed by Doctor and his team about what to expect at their destination. The facility, code-named Sanctuary, was a completely self-contained research and training complex built into a mountain range in an undisclosed location. The pilots would live there for the duration of their initial training phase, which was expected to last 6 months. Doctor explained that the first phase would involve comprehensive medical and psychological evaluation, followed by training in aircraft systems and flight techniques that were decades ahead of anything currently in operational use. The pilots would also undergo what he termed cognitive enhancement procedures, designed to optimize their natural abilities. As the transport aircraft began its descent, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension unlike anything she had experienced since her first solo flight. Through the small porthole windows available to the crew, she caught glimpses of a landscape that seemed almost alien, jagged mountains rising from desert valleys, with no visible signs of civilization anywhere. The landing strip was cut directly into the mountainside, camouflaged so effectively that it was nearly invisible until they were directly above it. As they touched down, Sarah realized she was crossing a threshold from which there might be no return. Her life as a conventional fighter pilot was ending, and something entirely new was beginning. The facility that emerged from the mountain as massive doors opened was breathtaking in its scale and sophistication. Hangar bays carved directly into the rock-housed aircraft that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie rather than reality. Personnel moved with purposeful efficiency, their faces bearing the expression of people engaged in work of paramount importance. Sarah's call sign, Phoenix, had taken on new meaning. She was being reborn into a world where the impossible became routine, and where the limits of human achievement were constantly being redefined. As she stepped off the transport aircraft into the artificial daylight of the underground facility, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The next 6 months transformed Sarah in ways she never could have imagined. The Sanctuary facility was a marvel of engineering and technology, with training simulators that created experiences so realistic they were often indistinguishable from actual flight. But it was the aircraft themselves that truly captured her imagination and challenged everything she thought she knew about the laws of physics and aerodynamics. The first time Sarah saw the XF-47 Aurora, she stood in silent awe for nearly 10 minutes. The aircraft looked like liquid mercury frozen in the shape of pure speed, with curves and angles that seemed to bend light around them. Doctor explained that the Aurora represented 30 years of classified research into advanced propulsion systems, exotic materials, and aerodynamic principles that conventional science was only beginning to understand. Traditional aircraft are limited by the compromises necessary for normal atmospheric flight, Doctor explained as they walked around the magnificent machine. The Aurora operates on different principles entirely. Its propulsion system doesn't just push against air, it manipulates the fundamental properties of space-time around the aircraft. Sarah's training began with extensive medical evaluations that went far beyond anything she had experienced in her regular Air Force career. The doctors and scientists at Sanctuary were particularly interested in her neurological responses and brain chemistry. They subjected her to batteries of tests designed to map her cognitive abilities at the cellular level, using scanning technologies that she was told were decades ahead of anything available to civilian medicine. The cognitive enhancement procedures started gradually. At first, they involved what seemed like advanced meditation techniques combined with biofeedback training. Sarah learned to control her heart rate, blood pressure, and even brain wave patterns with remarkable precision. She discovered that she could enter states of consciousness that dramatically improved her reaction times and decision-making abilities. As the weeks progressed, the enhancements became more sophisticated. Sarah underwent procedures that she was told would optimize the neural pathways in her brain, making the connections between different regions faster and more efficient. The doctors assured her that all procedures were reversible and safe, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being fundamentally changed at the most basic biological level. The physical training at Sanctuary was unlike anything she had encountered in her military career. The gravity chambers could simulate conditions ranging from zero gravity to forces that would crush an unenhanced human being. Sarah learned to function normally at acceleration levels that should have rendered her unconscious, and to maintain complete situational awareness in three-dimensional combat scenarios that would have overwhelmed even experienced fighter pilots. But it was the flight training that truly revealed the magnitude of what Project Nightfall was attempting to achieve. The Aurora and its sister aircraft could perform maneuvers that violated every principle of conventional aerodynamics. They could accelerate from standstill to supersonic speeds in seconds, turn at angles that should have torn them apart, and climb at rates that gravity itself. Sarah's first flight in the Aurora was an experience that redefined her understanding of what flight could be. The aircraft didn't just respond to her control inputs, it seemed to anticipate them. The interface between pilot and machine was so seamless that she felt like she was controlling the aircraft through thought alone. The enhanced cognitive abilities that had been developed through her training allowed her to process the incredible amount of information flowing through the aircraft's systems without becoming overwhelmed. During one particularly challenging training exercise, Sarah found herself flying in formation with aircraft piloted by some of the most advanced artificial intelligence systems ever developed. The AIs were capable of reaction times and decision-making speeds that no normal human could match. Yet Sarah found herself keeping pace with them, even anticipating their maneuvers in some cases. Doctor later explained that this was exactly the kind of performance the program was designed to achieve. The combination of enhanced human capabilities and advanced aircraft systems was creating pilots who could operate at levels that were previously thought impossible. Sarah was becoming something more than human, yet still fundamentally human in her creativity, intuition, and ability to adapt to unexpected situations. The other pilots in the program were undergoing similar transformations, each developing enhanced abilities that built upon their individual strengths and natural talents. Razor, a former Navy pilot, was developing an almost supernatural ability to track multiple targets simultaneously. Ghost, a Russian exchange pilot, could navigate through electronic warfare environments that would blind conventional aircraft. As Sarah's abilities continued to develop, she began to understand that Project Nightfall was preparing its participants for missions that went far beyond conventional military operations. The training scenarios included situations that seemed to involve aircraft and technologies that didn't belong to any known nation, and threat environments that suggested conflicts taking place in locations that didn't exist on any public map. 6 months into the program, Sarah received her first mission assignment. She was to join a reconnaissance flight over what the briefing documents referred to only as disputed territory. The mission parameters were unlike anything she had encountered. She would be flying solo in an Aurora equipped with sensor packages that could apparently detect and analyze phenomena that conventional science couldn't explain. As she prepared for the mission, reviewing classified star charts and navigation data that included coordinates for locations that seemed to exist in three-dimensional space, in ways that normal geometry, Sarah realized that Project Nightfall was not just about creating better pilots or more advanced aircraft. It was about preparing humanity for challenges that went beyond anything currently understood about the nature of reality itself. The night before her first operational mission, Sarah stood in her quarters looking out through the reinforced windows at the stars visible above the mountain peaks. She thought about the coffee routine that had defined her mornings just 6 months earlier, and how simple and predictable her life had seemed then. Now, she was about to embark on missions that would take her to places that might not even exist in the same dimensional framework as the world she had known. 2 years after that fateful morning, when Sarah had been pouring her coffee, she found herself standing in a briefing room that existed in a dimension slightly removed from normal spacetime. The walls showed real-time displays of star systems that were light years away, and the mission parameters on the screens described objectives that would have been incomprehensible to her former self. Project Nightfall had succeeded beyond its creator's wildest expectations. Sarah and her fellow pilots had become something unprecedented in human history, beings capable of operating in environments and under conditions that pushed the very boundaries of what life could endure. The cognitive enhancements had evolved far beyond simple improved reaction times. Sarah could now process information streams that included data from sensors detecting phenomena that existed partially outside normal three-dimensional space. The Aurora aircraft had evolved as well. The latest generation machines were less vehicles than they were extensions of their pilot's consciousness, capable of traveling through space in ways that made conventional faster-than-light travel seem primitive. Sarah's Aurora could phase between different dimensional states, allowing her to observe and interact with regions of space where normal matter behaved according to entirely different physical laws. Her missions now took her to locations throughout the galaxy, investigating anomalies that suggested intelligence and technology far beyond anything Earth had achieved. The disputed territory that had been mentioned in her early briefings turned out to be vast regions of space, where unknown civilizations were engaged in conflicts that could affect the fundamental structure of reality itself. On this particular morning, Sarah was preparing for what might be the most important mission of her career. Intelligence gathered by other Nightfall pilots had discovered evidence of a massive artificial structure in a star system 37 light-years from Earth. The structure appeared to be some kind of weapon or device capable of manipulating the basic forces that held matter together, and preliminary analysis suggested it was being constructed by a civilization with hostile intentions toward younger species like humanity. Admiral Hayes, the former colonel who had overseen Sarah's recruitment into Project Nightfall and who now commanded the entire program, conducted the mission briefing personally. The Admiral's own transformation through the program had been remarkable. She now possessed an understanding of space-time mechanics that allowed her to coordinate operations across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Phoenix, your mission is to conduct a detailed reconnaissance of the target structure and determine its exact capabilities and operational timeline, Admiral Hayes explained, her voice carrying harmonics that existed partially in normal sound waves and partially in quantum fluctuations that Sarah's enhanced consciousness could interpret directly. The structure appears to be nearing completion of what our analysis suggests is a reality manipulation device capable of rewriting the physical laws governing entire star systems, the Admiral continued. If activated, it could potentially cascade throughout local spacetime, making large regions of the galaxy uninhabitable for carbon-based life. Sarah reviewed the mission parameters with the enhanced cognitive abilities that allowed her to process vast amounts of information in parallel streams. The target system was defended by automated systems that operated according to physical principles that didn't exist in normal space, and the structure itself seemed to exist partially outside the normal flow of time, making conventional surveillance impossible. Her Aurora had been specially configured for this mission with sensor packages that could analyze matter and energy operating under exotic physical laws. The aircraft's dimensional phase generators had been enhanced to allow her to observe the target from multiple temporal perspectives simultaneously, essentially allowing her to see the structure's past and potential futures as overlapping probability matrices. As Sarah prepared for departure, walking through the vast hangar bays that now extended through folded space to accommodate aircraft that were larger than they appeared and smaller than they should be, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. The simple Air Force pilot who had stood in a cafeteria pouring coffee seemed like a character from someone else's life story. The enhanced humans who had emerged from Project Nightfall were no longer entirely human in the conventional sense, yet they remained fundamentally committed to protecting humanity and the values that defined human civilization. They had become guardians operating on a cosmic scale, defending Earth and its people from threats that normal humans couldn't even perceive. Sarah's Aurora lifted off from Sanctuary using propulsion systems that bent space-time around the aircraft, allowing instantaneous transition to faster-than-light travel without the violent acceleration that conventional physics would require. As Earth fell behind her, becoming first a point of light, and then disappearing entirely as she phased into dimensional space where normal geography became meaningless, Sarah felt the familiar surge of purpose and determination that had driven her throughout her career. The mission would take her through regions of space where matter itself behaved unpredictably, past stellar phenomena that could destroy unprotected minds simply through observation, and into direct contact with technology that represented millions of years of advanced development by intelligences that viewed humanity as barely more than organized bacteria. Yet Sarah felt no fear. The enhancements had given her capabilities that allowed her to function in environments that would be instantly fatal to normal humans, and her aircraft was equipped with defensive systems that could protect her from weapons that attacked targets through manipulation of fundamental physical constants. More importantly, she was no longer fighting alone. The other Nightfall pilots formed a network of enhanced consciousness that could share information and coordinate actions across galactic distances instantaneously. As her Aurora approached the target star system, Sarah began detecting the emanations from the alien structure. The readings were more disturbing than the intelligence reports had suggested. The device was not just a weapon. It was a tool for remaking reality itself according to the desires of its creators. If activated, it wouldn't just destroy planets or star systems. It would rewrite the basic laws of physics throughout local space, making the evolution of intelligent life impossible. Sarah opened communication channels to Sanctuary and her fellow pilots, transmitting her findings through quantum entanglement networks that operated faster than light and couldn't be detected or intercepted by conventional means. The response was immediate. She was authorized to take whatever action was necessary to neutralize the threat, using capabilities that had been held in reserve for exactly this kind of ultimate emergency. As she approached the alien structure, Sarah realized that the morning she had spent pouring coffee and contemplating routine training missions had been the last moment of her life, when the fate of human civilization hadn't rested, at least partially, in her hands. Project Nightfall had created protectors for humanity who operated on scales beyond normal human comprehension, but they remained fundamentally human in their commitment to preserving the future for the species that had created them. The coffee had grown cold that morning, but the determination that had driven Sarah through every challenge of her career burned brighter than any star.